we're certainly better with the fiber optic.
Yeah.
Right.
So the good thing-
We don't have an hour and number for the fiber optic yet.
Yeah.
They gave me one, but not to have anything, the grant, the funding, so, they've only had one response. Plus, you're pushing back and knocking doors, but Marshall and I were concerned about proposing your numbers if it's just gonna sit on the shelf.
Ours was done aside from, fiber optics, that was just an extra call.
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
The problem,
And you,
not the problem, but this is what we need this no matter what. We're in home. Brings up where we need to be, so. Brings up where we need to be, function. We have to keep it.
So the good thing about this too is this is killing two birds with one stone because our current desk radio in the office in the PD are obsolete. They don't even make them.
Okay.
So the good thing about this is if we have an incident that we need to go upstairs, we can take these off and put them upstairs where they're not just sitting there with dust.
This sounds similar to the system Strata put in when they built their PD.
Yeah,
No problem.
yeah, so it's just, you know, it's not like there's a room upstairs with all this technology and it just collects dust when it doesn't get used.
Not knowing how it all interrupted, when we didn't get a state ring quote, it was like, it's just gonna sit there waiting for a cord to be plugged in that works.
No, just work on it, that's super, yep. Thank you, Laura.
Nice to see you, still in town?
How do you feel? You're around.
We still employ him?
That's a good thing, Bob.
All right, it's 5 o'clock, call the meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance, led by Bill Bonnie.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Minutes of April 26th and March 3rd. Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote. Manifest, $135,892.38 dated May 6th, and $34,051.12 dated May 13th. Motion, please.
Motion approved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote. Father, how do you want, Paul, vote?
We have with us Paul DeShane, who's going to review the various grants that you've spoken of.
Okay.
Paul?
Okay. Oh, thank you. Hopefully we'll be brief enough to then answer any questions you may have. And if not, I'll try to find the answer to them at some date. But, looking at the agenda, we're looking at the congressional directed spending appropriations, what used to be called earmarks. In your board packet, there should be a piece that looks like this. And this is kind of an overview of the federal funding sources we're aware of. There's an orange line in the middle. Everything to the right has already been approved and appropriated, and the feds have made the money available in some form, fashion, or otherwise. Everything to the left is a pending or funding source. Now, as Congress hasn't even seen these necessarily, so you may hear about all the different alphabet soups out there, the American Family Plan Act, the American Jobs Plan Act, the American Recovery Plan Act, on the other hand, has already been approved. It's just that first column on the right-hand side of the orange line, and that's the $80,000 that, in general, has been allocated to the town of Newington. Still pending determination because they haven't finalized the numbers yet, and there's all sorts of different things that could go to. FEMA and the CARES Act, you've been dealing with those, reimbursements coming from that. What I'd like to focus on is the congressional directed funding earmarks. For a number of years, Congress, by rule, no longer accepted earmarks. Earmarks are now congressionally directed spending. Used to be where congressmen and women could present their pet projects for their state for specific funding needs. There was a lot of abuse many years ago when it was used an awful lot. The most famous one, I think, is a bridge in Alaska that's coined the first term bridge to nowhere. But be as it may, it fell out of favor for a while. Then Congress suddenly realized, well, that's all well and good, but now we've abdicated our responsibility for funding issues to the executive branch. Because they're the ones determining, once they've appropriated the money, who and what gets that stuff. So they revamped the whole program. There are a lot of structure to it, as I understand now. Haven't followed that part of it. I figure that's the congressional office problem, not ours. So this funding became to at least my attention about a month ago. Chris Pappas had a solicitation out for the first district. Hadn't really thought about what uses it could have been used, and I think that their filing deadline is gone and passed, at least for House members. On the Senate side, though, it was only within the last 2 to 3 weeks that the senators put out a feeler as to what would you like to apply for, and here's the parameters. We did so. The most specific one from Newington was Senator Sheen's office. So that's the grant application that I've been looking at. And again, this is all going to be fit into the federal budget, because that's what congressionally directed spending does. They direct it and add it to a department's budget, and the project specifically spelled out in the legislation. So there's this vetting and screening process, which I don't think ever existed before, so that's a good sign. So it won't be just one. At least that's the hope and goal. Excuse me. Paul, love it. I don't know which order these ended up in the board packets. We were really, just before the meeting, pulling these together real quick. In my order, I have the Bloody Point, or the depot building packet, but I can quickly swing to the police and emergency management.
So we do wanna, if I can just interject,
Sure,
Paul.
please.
The agenda talks about police department radios, and we do have the 3 chiefs here. But I believe the police department radios was taken, board members, of course, we approached police and fire to see what specific grants they might be interested in. And when we first started this process, we were thinking about police department radios, but I believe that's off the table, right, Chief?
Yeah.
Great. So the first item on the agenda should be next. The second item on the agenda was the fiber optic cable between the 3 emergency buildings, police, fire, and the town hall, which is the emergency shelter. And so, fiber optic.
Okay. Now move to, it's something that starts off with a kind of a graphic that looks like this.
Okay.
And again, also, there's no real parameters on this congressional directed spending. It can be anything that legally can be spent by federal dollars. And I suppose legalities is a relative thing. They could make it legal to spend it too. But be that as it may, there's apparently a very strong need in the connection points between all 3 buildings, the fire, the police, and the town hall, since they have an emergency management function to fulfill. It's unfortunate the Newington isn't in the 10-mile EPZ of Seabrook Station. I know Stratham was a big beneficiary of those monies and their emergency management planning. And the communities that aren't in there kind of missed out. But that's neither here nor there. You're not in, so you can't get in. But as a result, it kind of makes a stronger argument for your individual application, because you're not a beneficiary of that plan. So, I'll let the chiefs kind of explain more what the internal project is. I just learned just prior to the meeting, the good news is, none of this equipment that they're suggesting is absolutely dependent on a fiber network backbone to connect it to three buildings. We're having a problem getting that number, firmed up. We talked to Armand, who's been the town's IT, contractor, and they've been approaching the fiber optic, and internet providers in the area. And they initially told us it's usually a minimum of 7-day turnaround, and we only started asking them 5 days ago. So that's becoming a present problem, and I'll mention that maybe in a few moments. But I think it's important to hear from the chiefs, exactly what this equipment proposes to do and where it is deficient, in their operations. And although not dependent on a fiber optic backbone, it certainly would work a heck of a lot better if we had one.
So this is, we're gonna look for federal funds to do this, that we're talking?
Right, this is kind of like what I would call equipment needed in the buildings.
Okay.
The outside the building stuff is the number that's still hard to grasp.
All right.
Chiefs, do you wanna fill in the blanks here?
Sure. So we had a meeting, well, we've been having discussions probably last 5 or 6 months anyways, we've been discussing it with Bill, Bartlett from Two-Way Communications, who, pretty much handles all the radio communications vehicles and all that stuff in the town. So the EOC, which is over at the police station right now, is very archaic at best. To put it into simple terms, it's a closet with a radio in it. And the radio itself is archaic. So what needs to happen is we, in conversation with Bill Bartlett, we walk through what we have at the police site, the fire site. What would we need to do to bring everything up to where it needs to be functional today? And that's where these numbers came from in the setup and everything. So essentially, this would take care of the communication issues that we could have in town if we had any major events or natural disaster or anything like that, that essentially, it could go off, not off the grid, but go off of our main communications channels and be fully functional for police and fire, and even for community services or the town garage, highway stuff could be able to function. So essentially, as Paul was saying, is that we could do this system without the fiber optics. We can do it. It would be self-sufficient on its own. The communication essentially between the police and fire station will be wireless from the existing antenna towers that we have right now, via line of sight. In order for that to happen, we have to trim a couple tops of the trees a little bit, but it's completely doable. So the number that you have on there, the 124,080, that is the number for the entire project to be done. It can be stepped in, if need be, over a couple of years, based on the breakdown of everything, the equipment and the hardware. But the one thing that is a very, very good aspect of this is that, you think of traditional EOCs, is that there's a room, there's a bunch of radio equipment or computer stuff, technology, and it just sits there and it gets dust on it when it doesn't get used. With this, the new technology that they have is the radio system, more so over at the police station right now, is archaic at best. You cannot get replacement parts for it. They don't even manufacture the stuff anymore. But you could essentially grab one of these radios that could be sitting in the chief's office or at the patrolman's desk or anything like that. If we had an issue, they could unplug it from the wall, walk upstairs into the EOC and plug it in the wall, fully functional. So it's not like there's a piece of equipment that's just gaining dust. It's being used down here, and if we needed it, we could move it up, and then we could escalate it if it needed a bigger project or a bigger incident. We can go grab more radios off throughout the building. To escalate or de-escalate it, however needed to go. So it's not like we're just spending money, collecting dust, whatever, so. That's kind of the quick 50,000 overview, but this also would take care of the issue that the PD has right now as well, being twofold, that they need to replace their existing radio equipment. This would act for both, it can be done on both ends, so.
So we'd be able to eliminate one situation?
You can kill two birds with one stone.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
I know we discussed this on we just discussed it as a group when I was involved, when Chris got elected, we had the fire chief, the police chief, management for all that kind of stuff, and we knew some of that stuff was pretty antiquated.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
So where did the 124,000 number come from?
That was from two-way.
Oh, it was from two-way
Yeah,
south?
that was,
Okay.
this was all put together and packaged by two-way communication.
Okay.
I think that's the cumulative price.
I see.
Yeah, that's the cumulative, so if you take, that's the cumulative of all the hardware.
Yeah,
labor.
I read down through it,
Yep.
so.
Yep.
All right.
That is
So that's basically the ball of wax right there, about 125,000.
And that would take care of, so essentially, the three assets that we would need is two are at the police station, one would be the fire station.
Question I may have is if this gets approved by the feds, what are we looking at for a long-term, maintenance of all of this kind of equipment? Any idea what they might have said for that?
As far as them taking care of anything,
Yeah.
so we have existing contracts with two-way now to
Okay.
handle all of our stuff, so it'd just be an ongoing cost.
All right, so it'd
It
be
wouldn't, I
a
wouldn't
small
necessarily say it
inflated
would
cost
be,
probably.
correct,
Okay.
could probably a little.
I was just trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit, that's all.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
that's fine.
Can your patrols speak to an engine when they're on the road now?
So this is one of the things that we're definitely looking at. Yeah, we can by switching different channels, right? And that's not a problem, but we're relying on local, so we're relying on our towers picking up each other. With this system, it's just gonna be a more direct and better system. So when we're talking about the consoles that are in the offices, it does police and fire, and we scan all that. And again, like EJ was saying, our whole system, we were looking at putting Band-Aids on it, to the point where we were looking to have speaker systems in the PD so we could hear calls, and not being able to answer a call because of the system we have now, but just as long as we can hear it and then go outside. And we're looking at close to $4,000 for that. So when we talked to Bill from Two-Way, he proposed the consoles that we can shift and move. And the good thing about it is, and that we never thought, is in the EOC, and I think this is probably one of the best things that came out of the pandemic for EJ and I and Pat, is to actually sit down and have time to look at the EOC. And when we say antiquated, you still have that push button microphone, right, set up. And it was in the room, so in doing this, we're saying, okay, let's take the EOC out of that small closet. Let's bring it into the big room. If we can pull our radios from our offices and plug them in, or if EJ or Pat and I or somebody in the emergency management need to be in a separate place, we can just bring that radio and plug it in. It's all gonna be accessible. So, so again, the twofold benefit is that they can be removed, and now we're gonna have better communications, right? We're gonna be able to, with all the different channels that we're gonna have on, if we have the alphabet soup come in from the feds, they're gonna have their own radio systems up there, so we're not in anybody's way, and we could actually have our own dispatcher in one room monitoring everything, which will be phenomenal. And it's not, again, separate equipment, it's equipment that can be moved.
The answer to your question at the fire station is the chief and I have a portable radio on our desk, and it doesn't get very far outside of the village. So we have to
So
go.
like yesterday's incident, could your patrolman talk to the responding firefighter?
Yeah, they could, changing over.
It takes some work, but
Will
But
this-
I
will
couldn't
this
talk to
system
him
make
from the
that
station.
communications easier?
It would, once we get the connection between the towers, I believe, is topping off those trees and getting the newer technology in, we'll be able to talk, absolutely.
Yeah, so from our fire station, I couldn't talk to him, so I was in a meeting when that call came in and responded late to it as a medic, and I just happened to hear a portable radio pick up static and saw that it was in call and left. But from the fire station, no, we cannot pick up, it just doesn't get out.
But this system will fix that problem? Correct. So when this system is fully 100% operational, will any of your personnel be able to communicate with, by either switching over or switching channels with anybody else as well?
Yes.
Say like contacting Durham or Dover or Portsmouth or
Yeah.
Coast Guard if they're in the harbor?
Yeah, 'cause
Theoretically, yes.
yeah, right now our consulates are limited to the amount of channels that we have. So, yeah, absolutely, and we were actually talking about this the other day, interstate, talking to Maine, because they're partners in this, the whole incident, I mean, the whole industry down there on the waterfront and stuff.
Yes.
So with that, in a nutshell, it sounds like we're asking for the board to approve the application of two separate grants. One would be for the internal, system that the chiefs have just recommended for, or would you prefer doing it all as one lump sum, Paul?
I hadn't given that consideration, thinking as a totality.
Just
And
kind of one
maybe
way or the
that
other.
isn't even necessary to go into at this point, just
Well,
that the
it-
board is in support.
It has benefits and weaknesses. Splitting them in terms of inside building equipment versus outside building equipment. The inside, as already been stated, it can be operable without the ring net, therefore it diminishes the strength of a separate application for the ring, the internet ring. However, I wouldn't want the absence of that clarity on what that's going to cost necessarily impact and hold back this. One way Mark and I brainstormed just before the meeting was certainly apply for the 124,000 and change. Just rough spitballing, literally spitballing, capitalizing what we were given costs from Consolidated, but it was on a monthly basis, on a 36-month and a 60-month. So they were including basically the capitalization within a monthly rate.
Okay.
And that monthly rate was, well, at best, $2,191 versus your, in round numbers, $600 a month per bill, for 3 buildings. So, the difference between the two, one can assume, is somewhat of the capitalization cost. Spread over, let's say 3 months, because that's gonna be the highest, the capitalization cost, recovery is, 42,000 now. So, let's just say 50,000 for the sake of argument. That might be what I would project to be the intranet or ring cost.
Okay.
I don't know what construction costs are going to be, and, you know, in that market and competitive nature. You could authorize an application up to 200,000 or 500,000, you know, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Certainly don't give us an open-ended 2 billion. But, hey, if they wanna send it our way, why not, right? So, I don't know, that's another approach to do it, rather than one definitive one that works okay, but it doesn't have the capabilities that it should have, because it doesn't have the fiber optics, and have a separate fiber optic one that I'm just really just
We should know.
throwing
more
together.
tomorrow.
We're hoping we're getting more numbers tomorrow.
My kid was over there.
So essentially, we're waiting for a bid from like Consolidated to tell us what the fiber optic part of it would be.
Right.
What's the external construction cost?
If we're only waiting till tomorrow, I just soon wait and put it all together in one. If we're gonna apply to the feds, I'd wanna apply for everything from the feds.
I agree with that.
And if I may, Paul, wouldn't this all fall under the fiber optics and the equipment for the PD and fire, a communication infrastructure, right?
Absolutely. Right.
So we can tie it all together. If we tied it all together, I think it would look good.
I think the infrastructure's the way to go, because they're talking about.
It's a stronger application, it's just,
Right, yeah,
the
exactly.
data's not as strong.
Right.
Because of the.
So I agree with Bob, so what do you wanna do about it?
I just assume wait till we get the full quote from Consolidated on the fiber optic end of it. I'm certainly in favor of the 124 for the
Yes.
equipment end of it.
Right.
And, you know, if we get a price from Consolidated that's too prohibitive and feds say no to that part, but they say yes to the equipment, then I say we press forward with the equipment, but let's wait till we get that price and then we can.
The difficulty is the application is due tomorrow.
Right, so tomorrow, do it
Tonight
right.
is, tonight's the night you have to decide where you're applying
If
for.
we,
No,
yeah, if we don't get the quote tomorrow,
And then we'll just go with the equipment, right?
or we can give you an estimate.
I would go with an estimate at that, I wouldn't,
Put it all together.
Let's
Give
go
you
with
an
the
estimate.
estimate.
I would rather,
I agree with that.
yeah, if we have to make application by tomorrow, then I say press on with it.
Yeah, I agree.
whatever, give us a number, we'll go with it.
I'd say on the low end, 200, but that might be a little constricting, you know, another 100,000.
Let's
Just
go with
because
300.
So 124 for the equipment, and then
the remainder is for the other.
double that for the wire,
Right.
so.
250, 300?
Now, say 250, 260.
Get swing for the fences on these.
Yeah, well, that's it, you got one shot at it.
Right.
Yeah.
You think 3 is better to go for 3 and then see?
I think it gives you the wiggle room for
I agree with that as well.
you know,
Why don't we do it that way,
we
then? Let's go
discussed.
for 3.
You got a motion for 300?
So moved.
Seconded it?
Second.
All in favor?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Now, one other question, this has nothing to do with cameras on your uniforms, right, chief?
No. No, it doesn't. We're still actually waiting for the state, they're looking at a funded mandate.
I know they are, that's why I'm asking you, because I'm trying to keep ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah, the only issue is the funded mandate right now. I think it was, the state was looking only at $100 and something thousand for it, and out of all the police departments in the state of New Hampshire.
They'll take care of Effingham, maybe.
Yeah, that's the problem. But I will say what we are looking for is, and I talked to my police commissioner regarding this, is we're trying to get together, and we'll know within the next couple of months, we're trying to get the smaller communities together, so we go in
As a
with
group.
all the officers as a group, but we gotta figure out the cloud situation and server situation.
Okay, well, thank you for the update, I appreciate that, but you know, it's one of those things I've been thinking of, we should do, so, thank you.
Hey, moving on.
The only thing is, that each application needs to be signed, so
Yeah.
I need the board to
I'd like to
have
give
a
the
motion
power
on the
to-
record to who's authorized to
Power
sign.
to the
Authorize
chairman?
the chair to sign, and
Yeah, absolutely.
you'll
Is
be
that okay
around
with you, Bob?
tomorrow, right?
Second, yes.
You're a green pen.
Great,
All
Yeah.
set?
thank you.
Pardon?
It's actually electronic,
Yeah,
so.
it's gonna be
okay.
electronic signature.
You're allowed-
Here, give us a button.
Right.
Like your little presses my buttons.
The other application I've been working on, has been the restoration of Bloody Point and, the depot building. And in your packet, there should be a little spreadsheet. Martha and I went out and measured,
Hang on a second.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Is any of this federal funding, Pat, is any of this tied to the ambulance question I asked you?
None of this is.
No.
I have had some conversations with the rehab in Effingham, and they go to it all too often, the ambulance service, the services there. So I think there's probably avenues for that, but this is not the same as the drug outreach funding. So, still kind of exploring into that with the other rehab facilities in the state, trying to get a pool
Just
together.
so Paul knows what we're talking
Yeah.
about, we've got a rehab center that's looking to move into town. And I asked the deputy chief to look into getting some of Senator Shaheen's rehabilitation money that she had just got approved through Congress, set aside for our ambulance. If we're gonna be providing services to it, then, you know, it's.
On a fairly highly uninsured population that we won't recoup any costs on. Most of those people are self-pay at best. So there's definitely an outstanding liability of those transports.
But, you know, we just voted at town meeting to spend $400,000 on a new ambulance?
$50,000 into capital for the replacement.
Fifty
For the
is not
replacement,
used, so.
yeah.
That's
But
taken
if-
off what cost,
But
yeah.
if Senator Shaheen's money can go in there, we'd certainly get our new ambulance a little quicker and
Absolutely,
feel a little bit better about sending it over there all the time.
absolutely.
Thank you, chief.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Jeff.
sorry,
Catch you later.
sorry to interrupt you, Paul, I saw before they left, I wanted to.
Bird in the hand, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah, the spreadsheet in your packet is the next item. Martha and I visited the sites because as I started viewing different emails and descriptions of what the project was, I was getting a little confused, so I needed to see what was on the actual ground. I was familiar. And understanding that Fox Point was a project we did in 2009, Martha was able to get me the expenditures there. And we measured up that, and the premise is that a linear foot of shoreline is gonna cost pretty much the same, no matter where it is, it's on the bay. So in 2009 dollars, you had at Fox Point 302 linear feet of shoreline that was improved. The construction costs were $213,850 at a cost of about $708 per linear foot. Engineering costs were at $32,500, which represented 15% of the construction costs. So, in contrast, Bloody Point, we measured out, there's more than just 422 linear feet of shoreline, but that's as quick as I could identify that needed the erosion control measures, particularly on the river side of the point.
Yes.
It's eroding quite big, quite a lot. In fact, it was kind of interesting, some of the historical documents I saw had the same pictures that I had taken from the same angle, and you can see the banks gone at least 5 to 10 feet in from those pictures that are maybe 10 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
So, it's going
That's,
fast.
that's why we have to dredge the harbor.
That's right.
Probably, yeah. So, using the 2009 per linear foot cost, that's, I would estimate it to be 298,000 change. I rounded it up to 300. Then I have access to a CPI calculation module. So 300,000 in 2009 really is 380,000 in 2021 dollars.
Okay.
I applied a 20% engineering costs because quite honestly, I was frankly surprised that you got it for 15%. So maybe there were some considerations there that I don't know of. That's a low end of engineering cost. In my experience, 20 is closer to normal. And, you know, a lot of things have changed, and there's probably would be a lot more regulatory processes to go through, the wetlands permitting and shoreline, et cetera. So I figured 20% is certainly more than reasonable at making it 76,000. So just for the shoreline stabilization, it's $456,000, using that as a reference point. I did not have the opportunity to actually speak to an engineer, particularly the engineer that worked on this. So I don't know what his ideas on my calculations here are, but it's the best available. That then leaves what do you do with the building. I employed 2 different methodologies trying to figure out what might be more palatable. One is really simple and clear. You go to the assessment card, if you're at 100% of market value in your evaluations, they apply 45% depreciation due to the condition of the building. So in a replacement cost at $118 a square foot, if the building was pristine, it would be valued at $174,700. It's now assessed at $96,000. So the 45% depreciation would be the cost to bring it up. That's $78,006. That's one approach. It's an approach I'm not really comfortable with because I think it's really low volume. And the other thing to recognize on assessing cards, assessors typically don't spend a lot of time on exempt properties, so there's probably not a lot of hard numbers in here, but it's just a comparative purpose. I then went on a square footage cost methodology. The gross square footage is 2,120 square feet, 2.5 stories in the footprint given. I had the assessed value is on living area, which cuts out all sorts of different things, which aren't really applicable to a construction rehab, because you have to go from the outside in, not just the little places that you can, live in. So, went on the internet, I was thinking, possible rehab costs of $150 a square foot. Going on the internet, I found ranges between 170 to 250
Right.
for restoration.
Restoration,
Right,
exactly.
not refurbish or, just make it pretty.
Right.
We're talking restoration because it's a historical building. So I picked the $200 a square foot. Knowing that you pretty much have, it's a gut and rebuild.
No,
The siding's gone, the roof is gone, who knows what the sheeting underneath is. There's no floor in sections of the house that I found in the appraisal. So it's very easily top to bottom. You got carpenter bees in there, and a lot of destruction to bring that. So I feel very comfortable at 200 and using the full gross square footage, reaching a $424,000 cost to restore that building. And that's just restoring. That's not really making it customizable to any particular use. And I'll speak to the use issue in a minute.
Okay.
So using my two methodologies, that's how I end up with a high and a low restoration cost. There's, again, the fixed cost of the $456 for the shoreline restoration, the building restoration and high and low that I just gave you. I spitballed $20,000 for land clearing and other improvements on site. Right now, it's just a thicket. You couldn't use any part of it, because it's just so overgrown.
Right.
So you have to go in there, clean out all the underbrush, do some selective cutting. Of course, part of that probably will need permitting too, because it's within the shoreline protection areas, so.
Absolutely.
20,000 there might be a little light, but that's my best estimate, from my experience. The last item is the acquisition costs, and speaking with DOT, here's the nebulousness of it. In the appraisal report, which is this picture, you've probably seen that before, because I think Lulu had shown it before. The appraisal is only for that area encompassing the red line. It's about, I forget now.
2.2 acres.
To just barely, right. It doesn't encompass the entire property as we understand it as Bloody Point. The limited right-of-way designation outside the red area is, something that was done way back when possibly even when the General Sullivan Bridge was, built. But long story short, the state is unwilling, as I understand it, or it would be very, very, very difficult to remove that designation from that piece. You'd have to go back to, again, a right-of-way layout commission at the governor and council level and have the public hearings and go through all that. And, ostensibly, yes, they're gonna need some of that because you can't predict within the next forever what might happen to the new Little Bay bridges, so they might need some of that property. I almost doubt they would need all of it, but, who knows? Because of that nebulousness, I would doubt that they relinquish that. So that's kind of off the table. Then there's the green area, the dotted line, that says DOT owns it, but it's not been part of the right-of-way layout. My contact at DOT is trying to find out whether that can be also included, but it is not included in the appraisal.
Yeah, that amazed me when they did that, because I thought that should have been included in the beginning.
Well, apparently I'm not quite sure why there's a reason, why they did, other than.
They couldn't answer it either, so
Right.
they brought it.
It just didn't get included.
Right.
So, in the limited right of way. To me, that also presents some issue of frontage on the red line. I guess they're inferring there's frontage on Bloody Point, but I don't see that it even closely matches what your minimum frontage requirements are. So, there's active activity seeking guidance from the Attorney General's office, whether the green area short, the appraisal came out with a range of about 470,000 to 550,000 for the area in red. And part of that is due to the covenants that were gonna be placed on the red area, involving. For your information, I included a wider, picture here that, kind of shows even more historical points of interest. I didn't know the ferry landing was to the west of Bloody Point. I thought it was off Bloody Point, but, now I'm shown I'm wrong. It's interesting how the historic, registry of historic places, included nothing but the rail bed and the depot. And interesting enough, it seems to go over what is owned by Sprague. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but, it is what it is. And of course, on your tax maps, you also show that the parcel includes land on the west side of the Spalding, which isn't at all been appraised or looked at or even considered by DOT to relinquish. The engineer that I did speak to, they said that they've been approached by a private interest to acquire that for some sort of residential development. That's all she could tell me. There's a process that would have to go through, much like that green area in this other map. So, I guess the goal, and I'll touch upon this when I get to the application, and this applies to both the police department and fire department application and this application. There's a goal section. So it's difficult for me to identify what the goal is necessarily, other than some very broad, nebulous, overarching belief that it's great to have public access to the bay, and it's great to protect a historic property.
But
Of which-
not to interrupt,
Yep.
but Paul, wasn't there an issue with the building and historical restrictions that weren't going to make it usable, and so therefore it might not make sense for?
Well, that's the next part I was gonna get into. Those overarching things are great, but can the town afford necessarily to invest in that? And by that I mean, the covenant that is being proposed, that was in the appraisal, goes over the entire red area. Not just the house, not just the rail bed, it goes the entire area. And if you look, I've included the covenant and have pointed out different areas of concern. The general intent, there's acknowledgement that there might be archaeological values there. So the terms of the covenant say, basically, if you're gonna disturb any area, you're gonna have to do some sort of archaeological dig or investigation to assume you're not disturbing whatever.
Right.
Be it colonial stuff or
Some of the dead
Native American stuff or.
The debt shrubbery bank, something like
Yeah.
that.
You have to maintain the exterior, at least no worse than it is presently. Well, that's a pretty low bar. But if the building were to fall down, then it becomes the question, are you gonna replace it? The covenant seems to imply you would have to. The interior has to stay as is, because there's historical significance to the interior.
Right.
Because of the waiting area for the train and the ticket counter and the household, and stuff. So if you had a goal of making it a museum, okay, that covenant wouldn't hurt. Your goal is to use it for some other purpose. I don't know if the configuration would suit any purpose other than a museum. I'm more, you guys know your community better than I as to what, you might want there. If there's any excavations on any of the land, you have to get permission to do so. So, clearing the brush, I wouldn't think would count, but if you found hummocks or knolls, or you wanted to put a little picnic area, or regrade this or regrade that, now you need permission for that too. And they would be within their authority not to grant it.
They buried down there, Paul?
Not that we find, we'll do the archaeological dig and find something.
Couple arrowheads.
Section 7, maintenance and administration, you shall keep it in a good repair and shall not allow the appearance of the building to deteriorate from any material way from the present time. Alterations, no structure or subsequent structure shall be placed or erected or relocated or demolished, or no excavation shall occur on the premise subject to the preservation easement without prior written consent. They wanna keep the area in and around the depot as relative to its historical significance as possible. Now, some of the pictures show a couple of outbuildings out there, so you might be able to stick those in under, different references, but I wouldn't bet on it. And if you wanted to put up a pavilion for a picnic area, don't.
What about a rail line?
Probably not. Probably not.
I think we ought to look at the bottom line.
Right. So, yeah, you're in,
You know,
so going back to my original cost estimate, the AG's office has also been asked, because this is part of a mitigation for the loss of the General Sullivan Bridge,
Right.
whether or not the $500,000 acquisition cost that I've included here is waivable. Under state law, you have to charge somebody, they can't just give it away.
And we don't have an answer on that.
And we don't have an answer, we won't have that for months,
Okay.
if a year.
So
So the total cost, high end, is 1.4 million. This grant probably won't come until the next fiscal year of the federal government, so that means after October 1st of 2021. That means you're probably not gonna start anything, I mean, you have to work out all this acquisition issue. You might have it ready by the summer of 2022 construction season.
But it appears that there are so many restrictions on the property that it wouldn't be in the town's best interest.
That's why I bumped it to 1.5 million, for
and I think,
the uncertainty
with
here.
that number, I think you're very, very conservative, and with
Could
the
be, yes.
restrictions on it, I think we're literally screwed.
Right, even with 150,000 offered by the DOT, you're still looking at 1.35.
Well, you know, Paul, Teddy and I have been involved with Strawberry Bank since the beginning, and those numbers were never ever anywhere near what they estimated to be because of archaeological digs and all this other stuff, so, like you said. Now, my question to you is, or for Martha is, has the state indicated if they sold this to somebody else, what they'd make them do with it?
Same thing.
So that number is just gonna sit there like the old town school does. Thank you.
That's the next step.
Let's
Let's get rid of this step first.
Yeah, I would say,
I'm
you know,
sorry.
personally, in looking at all this sort of thing, I would think the town would be so restricted in terms of it, particularly the depot itself.
Yeah.
You can gain the same return on having the depot preserved if it's sold to a private party. The difficulty with that is it conflicts with the public access you want to the point. So, I don't see, there are too many conflicts here, both in terms of the covenants, the situation, you know, if the depot was further away or not, you know, right on Bloody Road, Apple Lake Point Road, and you have to walk right by it, you know, people could knock on people's doors just trying to get to the point. And you know, even my experience in Stratham, we have a ranger's house on Stratham Hill Park that we rent out. That person, although it's a very good deal on the rent, as far as market rates, they had to put up a lot of crap at being a public park. And a lot of people knock on the doors, asking questions, and thinking that's where I go to find information
Right.
about the park. And, you know, how do I get this? How is this water turned on? Why is this power not on? So it's not a very hospitable.
Yeah, we have to make a decision on this by the public hearing, is it?
Actually, right, if you are interested in a grant,
Right.
applying for a grant, it would really be tonight.
Right.
If not, then it's the public hearing, or whenever you meet again with DOT.
See, yeah.
Right.
I mean, save a lot of heartache and grief. just think it's too expensive for the town. I can't see it with all the land that we have and everything that we have, Fox Point, the town forest, up behind the library, behind the old stone school, apartment. And we got a great deal of expense with no income.
Correct.
I would tip my hat to the historic district people and Little Pickering in particular, who really fought hard for this, and to see it. But we have to look at it for fiduciary responsibility and the dollars and cents and the impact it will have on the town. I can't support this at this particular time. And I think the motion could be to put it to bed. It kind of
At this time, juncture, I don't feel like giving a motion to proceed for the application for funds to do it. Is that what you're asking? I'll make that as a motion. I don't think we should do it.
I'll second that.
Yeah,
And
and all of us have,
I think you hit the nail on the head, Ted, seriously. I mean, I didn't interrupt you, but, you know, this is, the too many unknowns, and Paul's done a lot of research on this. Excellent research, Paul, thank you for that. A lot of stuff we knew about it, but, you know, and
I'd say black and white, rather than
Right.
subjective opinion.
it's an emotional issue, and we can understand it.
Right,
And we've all been involved in some kind of historical preservations and taking care of things through the years. This is just, at this time, at the juncture of Newington, there's so much pending with with the mall, the taxes and everything else. I can't see us taking on a big project, conservatively $1.5 million. I think it'd be hell of a, it'll be double that by the time, but we're looking at hard figures of it. I think it's too big a project for the town to take on this particular.
I agree.
Yeah, there's too many ifs, there's just not enough solid answers. What will the state do? What will the state give us? You know, there's just too many hurdles to get over to get to the point where we could make a positive decision.
It pains me to hear that, but I understand it completely, and I support it. Interesting perspective or irony in here is some of my research led me to, the acquisition of the property and the construction of the General Sullivan Bridge, and very specifically, in 1937, this was supposed to be a park,
Right.
much like Hill Park.
And Dover got the park.
And if it didn't get built, there must be a reason.
So then we get the budget, we get the shaft.
So that was a vote.
The vote, we haven't voted yet. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
we
So
move
moving on to double pole settlement,
Yes.
no business, if that's okay with you.
Please.
Well, hopefully you all acquired the settlement agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have two physical copies here for you to sign,
Bob read it and said it was all right for us to sign.
Ostensibly, this is not different than my summation that I gave on the third, last time I was here. Just a little word snipping here and there to make clear. It's still, it's thick because of all the attachments of Exhibit A, which represents every pole identified in all 7 communities that they are committing to remove. Everyone is mentioned, right? And everyone is in agreement in terms of the terms that were discussed and brought forward. A lot of good back and forth, and I can truly tell you that this is probably the best deal you're gonna get. In my
That's
guesstimation.
101 polls?
107, I think.
I'll make a motion if we authorize the selectmen to sign the settlement agreement.
How many lines for signature do you see on there, Mike? On the
Authorize
Newington
the
thing,
chairman.
I saw one.
That's all I see is one,
That's
the
right.
chairman.
That's what I saw.
The guy they call the chairman is the signer.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome, what a
You
friend's
can have a
call.
motion, you can have a motion that I can sign it.
Absolutely. I'll move that motion.
The motion is to accept the proposed.
Do we have discussion on this? Do I have anything to say?
All in favor, any abstentions?
All in favor?
Move the motion, yes. All in favor.
Opposed? Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
And before we all forget,
Ben,
Is that
okay.
Is that isn't okay?
I think so.
Look at that.
I got a black one if you want.
Oh, green.
Thank you, Paul, for all your work, outstanding work you're doing, outstanding.
Yeah.
We very greatly appreciate it.
Yes, we
Well,
do.
thank you.
Everything.
Now, you guys having a Stratton Fair this year or not?
No,
I'm not.
I read no.
Yeah.
The only one though, I think. that
Yeah, the
I've
problem
seen
is
so
we're the
far.
first.
Huh?
Yeah.
Right.
So you have to enter your contracts probably back in
You got a
November.
timeframe.
They said,
Bill and
yeah,
do in
they said
November,
January they
but it would
wanted.
be in July.
Right.
Now, I didn't read anywhere in this, if there's the schedule, I know there's a number of how many they've taken down, but do we have any say-so on which ones we'd like them to start with first, like Nimble Hill Road, or?
You have input, yes, and I articulated that desire that Nimble Hill would be the priority. It's 28 a year, I think there's more than 28 on Nimble Hill, so,
Mhm.
you know, if it's one or two more than 28, then they'll probably do it, but if it's like another 28,
Yeah.
you'll probably be done in 2 phases.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
just curious.
Do we have anything else with Paul's?
The sprayed
Spray.
automated form that Paul mentioned to you at your last
Right.
meeting, you were going to think about it. I recommend going forward with the automated
I like
form.
it, yeah, I do too.
Do we have any oversight to make sure that Sprague's not playing with the numbers, or?
Well, the design of the form is, and first of all, the mock-up you got had Sprague Energy all over it.
Right.
That'll be taken off because it'll be on our website. And the design of the form is that everyone gets the same information as soon as you press send. So if they monkey with it, our numbers won't got it. Because we'll get the same data as they do.
Well, that's good. So they're all on the same boat.
The point was try to increase the simultaneous notification so they could be more timely. Many times we get a report, we fill out a form, and we send out an email. It's already maybe a day or two before they got around to calling us. And it was a day or two before we start circulating everything. So now you're 4 days out.
Right.
Anything, you know, if you've got something emitting that day, you'd like to know, it's that day, let me go find out.
Right.
Because, as you know, odors are fleeting, and, they disappear. I'm under no illusion that this is going to solve everything,
Right.
but it's a step in the right direction.
It's just a simple motion that we approve the form after.
Yes.
And authorize its,
You have-
Why don't
that's
you make
just-
it, Bob, I'll second.
I'll make a motion that we approve the form,
electronic,
the electronic form,
right, for placement on the website.
And I'll second it.
placement on the website, immediate use.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's it for Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you again, Paul. Outstanding work.
Nice job, Paul. Now we have a
Excellent.
excavation permit, Paul.
Yes.
Permit application.
The Adams Homestead property has requested that the Unitil gas line be connected to their home. Unitil is on the fire station side of Nimble Hill Road.
Right.
And they're asking to excavate under, hopefully to go directional boring under the road.
Okay.
What direction of the boring?
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all ledge over there, over there.
The good news is, of course, we haven't paved, we haven't ground or paved Nimble Hill Road.
Right, yeah.
We expect to in the next year or two, so if things get bad and they can't directional bore,
Right.
we'll be paving it pretty soon
I
anyway.
have no problem with that.
Yeah, Guy hit utilities there.
Right.
Usually
You
you
don't have much of a choice.
Oh, Ron?
Yeah.
We don't traditionally.
I would think you.
Directional bore, I would kind of, it's overkill, but if they actually have to open that,
Yeah.
I would recommend some volume.
Thank you, Paul.
Contact right, or take the raw material in, or.
Did you have a foundation in the fire department or something?
Well, this is the gas tank, right?
Yeah.
But we haven't done this before, that's not with the gas company. We don't go with the water company. We don't go with any other utilities.
Right. I can can check with council and,
Yeah. Why don't you get a tentative approval,
Subject
pending
to-
research on the
Many of these utility companies have a standing bond for this. anyway.
Right.
It's a
I would think they would, yeah.
It's just to get on the roster as one of the payees.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul, that's good advice.
Very good advice.
Mike, you made the motion, seconded,
we haven't yet.
all in favor?
All right.
Okay, that's it, and we got wood monitoring wells.
Yeah.
For the PFAS, something like that. Just need a motion to proceed?
Yes.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
discussion?
The only thing I asked Martha to check was to make sure that none of those bores for the wood were on private property, that they were all on town property, and she told me that they were.
Right.
And the only other thing I'd add is that the one that they're gonna do in front of the school,
Yeah.
big company like that, they have a lot of flexibility, they're looking at doing a lot of drills. Can they not do that school one while school is in session? Wait till school
I
is
think
out.
that's a good reason.
That way,
Good
it
reason.
doesn't interrupt the children, they've had enough
Exactly.
interruptions this year.
Good point.
Very good point, Bob. Very
Yeah,
good point.
yeah,
I got no problem with that.
And we're waiting for one further approval, the wastewater treatment plant property. One of the wells is on their property down behind, Subcom.
okay,
So we're working with wastewater treatment on that.
okay.
Have they been addressing that at all, Martha? I didn't know that we had one down there.
Yes, we have a substation, the
Okay.
plant does, right close to the river.
Right, okay, yes, okay, not dawned on me, okay, all right.
And I know, just so you guys know, Martha was gonna express her concern that, you know, to put some sort of a ugly wellhead on, town hall front lawn, cause we do have one right out here.
Yeah.
So that, some of them around town, like if you drive across McIntyre, it's just a square shaft, and it looks
Yeah.
like it's got a gate head with a
Right.
padlock on it, but, I hate to see something like that out here aesthetically, that would.
It's a little more attractive looking, yeah.
And we spoke with the representative this morning, and she said they would all be flush to the ground.
Oh, good.
Good.
Perfect.
All those in favor?
All right.
Anything else, Miss Martha?
That is it,
Motion
thanks
to adjourn,
very
Mr.
much.
Chairman?
Gentlemen, you got anything?
No,
Good. Rob, anybody else have
Motion
anything?
adjourned.
That's
Did
all.
you have something you wanted to
So
bring up
moved.
in new business? Did I read an email with something that was gonna be brought up in new business?
I think it was the monitoring wells that we
Monitoring,
just,
yeah,
right.
okay.
Okay,
Second?
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
thank
I'll
you.
make a note of who was here tonight, please.